Hey everybody, my name's Alex, and this is Bento Radio. Now before we get started, just some of the usual stuff, plus some other stuff. Mostly, I'm sorry about the background noise. The background noise is just going to be happening for the next little while because it is boiling in my studio because it is July on the East Coast of America. And if you know what that means, it's just a lot. It'll always be a lot. It's just 100 degrees Fahrenheit out. I don't know what that is in Celsius if you're watching this internationally, but know that it's very hot out, and that means it's very hot inside, especially if you have a elevated space like I do at my studio space. So I am running an air conditioner until mid-August, basically. But on that note, if you like the show, be sure to subscribe to it wherever you get it, whether that be on YouTube if you're watching it, or in your podcast app of choice. And if the podcast app of choice lets you leave a review, that really helps the show. Go ahead and leave a 5-star review and what you think about it. And if you really love this episode on YouTube or the show on YouTube, be sure to follow the channel, obviously. But be sure to like the video and leave a comment in the comments below. And so the next thing I want to talk about is if you absolutely super love the show, you can go to the show's website, which is bento-box.ghost.io. That website will be available for you to copy and paste or click on in a bunch of different places the description of this podcast, either on YouTube or if you're listening to it, as well as the description of the YouTube channel and the description of the podcast in the general description for the entire show. It is everywhere, so definitely go check that out. And you can find stuff like new articles linked to some of the episodes, as well as more generalized essays I've written about anime more broadly. You can also find a link that is unfortunately not working, and I won't be able to get to it until this weekend, so maybe if you see it, you'll be able to download it, but it is a link in the top navigation that will take you to the beta test of my watch list app, Bento Watch, which is my idea of a more, what's the best word for it, a more critically minded watch list app that really allows you to take notes on every single episode of a show you're watching in any given season. I've been testing it for a while. I've had an open beta for a while. The latest beta just actually timed out, so I need to update it so everybody can still use it. But I'm looking forward to doing that this weekend, so stay tuned on that. And on that note, before we jump into it, this is going to be a little bit different of an episode. I do these about once a season. Usually I'll wait a little longer, but I've got a good idea of what I want to watch this year, this coming summer 2026 season. And I just pick 3 to 5 shows and give you what I'm looking forward to this season. This is also, especially with the summer version of this, I usually rehash it just a little because we're usually going into August around that time, and that is when I am in New York City for Anime NYC, and I cover that press, and I make it a point to sit in all the screenings and watch the stuff in all the screenings. There's always something that comes out of those screenings. Year it was Chan of the Boy, another year it was Delicious in Dungeon, another year it was Fiancé, last year was Sentenced to be a Hero, and these are always the shows that like showstoppers that like they paid for the poster in the Javits Center. That looks really interesting, but I don't know what that technically means. And then you see the show and you're like, oh, this is a big deal of a show. It's very often, at least on the East Coast of the U.S., the first time that a lot of people get their eyes on that thing. There'll probably be an addendum to this somewhere in my coverage of Anime NYC, because I am approved, I'm on the press pool for that, so I will be going with full press credentials, and hopefully I'll have something cool for you guys to dig your teeth into from that this year, like I did last year. Last year I published a written interview with Hiwaka Bayashi and Hiriki Maishi from Studio Trigger, all about the companion stocking from Beer. Definitely look forward to that stuff. Once again, you'll be able to find like any interviews I do or my daily write-ups of the convention over at bento-box.ghost.io. Now, without further ado, let's jump into what we're talking about this week, and that is my most anticipated shows for summer 2026. Now, before we jump into I have 3 picks total here. Before we jump into those, I want to talk a little bit more about what I was talking about in the opening, which is every year there's one standout show from the screening. And I'm probably going to implore you to do this at all points in my coverage of Anime NYC, but if you have screening room at your local convention, or you have a chance to get to go to an advanced screening of something, I encourage you to take it, because in these screenings go one of many ways. And I'll give you examples for each. So sometimes you get a pack of halfway decent shows with one that's pretty notable and it stands out. That's what I would characterize the screening in which I saw Tomo-chan as a boy in. I don't remember any of the other shows that were there, but I remember that particular one because it was better than the other stuff I saw in that screening. The next thing you get is you oftentimes get a screening of a big show. This is like when either a studio has said, no, we want to screen this specifically, or the production team or the promoter know they have a hit on their hands. This is what something Delicious in Dungeon looks like. And then there's the last two. There's Yakuza Fiancé and Sentenced to be a Hero. Those two were just in the middle of a bunch of different things. Actually, I think Sentenced to be a Hero was at the end of a screening, but Yakuza Fiancé was just in the middle of a bunch of other stuff. And it was really funny to be in the room for that particular screening because that thing came on and the entire room was automatically paying attention. And you got oohs and ahs and shock gasps and stuff because it was so... I don't know if you've ever seen, and I encourage you to go check it out because it's worth it. And also, I think that there's a place in my heart for Yakuza-centered stories, but that's the first episode of Yakuza Fiancé is salacious enough to a point where it catches you off guard, especially if you're in a room with other people. And hilariously, if you go back and you look at the coverage of that particular screening, that's everybody's reaction. Oh, like, in the room, it was wild. And then it's to say that sometimes you can pick them, but you have to be able to see enough of the show to guess that it'll be fun, or it needs to make such a hard-hitting first impression, even off the trailer, that you're like, Jesus, like, that thing goes on the list. And very often I do this episode a little further into the season, once enough stuff has come out and once I've seen enough stuff. But like I said in the opening, I try to pick 3 to 5 shows, and I just have the 3. And a lot of the reason why I have the 3 this year is because, with the exception of the last one, there's a lot of returning stuff this summer season, and my first 2 picks are going to be from returning shows. So, on that note, let's jump into what we're talking about. The first show I want to talk about. And the first show I want to talk about here is the return of, actually, Season 3 of Jobless Reincarnation, Mushoku Tensei. I've talked about the show. If you've been a regular viewer of the YouTube channel, or you've been a listener of the podcast, and you haven't heard my thoughts on the first 2 seasons, I'm actually surprised because that's one of the most popular things I've ever put out on any platform. And it's one of the more popular things to talk about on the internet. And I understand why people have an aversion to the show. But I think especially the first two seasons are so front-loaded with making you understand that, yes, this is a total wish fulfillment fantasy show, like most isekai, but partially because Jobless Reincarnation, in its many incarnations, please excuse the pun, is largely responsible for the current form of what isekai look like. It's doing stuff initially first that you don't realize it is because the anime adaptation came out later and the manga adaptation came out later. It was originally, I believe, a web novel. But it's also dealing with a character who has his hard edges intact when he dies. Spoiler alert for Jobless Reincarnation, the guy doesn't just get transported, he full on dies. Truck-goon style, hilariously. hilariously, actually, that's part of it. But by not standing off the edges and by showing you somebody who didn't shuffle off their mortal coil early in life, and who was definably a failure, it's touching on something that's much less wish fulfillment-y, because so much of what he's doing in his new life is about making real what he never got in his first run, so to speak. And having listened to the entirety of the light novels, I'm still listening on and off to the extra stories and stuff that are strictly not necessary for what the main storyline is. As we go along, you'll get more and more of that. In the trailer, you see the journal. In the trailer, you see a Topher, a Tophe. So you know that you're going to be going to some very specifically troubled places. And I can't wait to see all this stuff in animation. It was between having seen the original, the first 2 seasons, and all of the illustrations for the light novels, you can piece together in your head a pretty good understanding of what's happening, but it'll be great to see Julia White Fox's interpretation of it. So that's the first show that I'm looking forward to. And that is going to be, I believe, on Crunchyroll. I'm going to try and, because all 3 shows I'm picking are 3 different streaming services this time around, I'm going to try and mention those. So Jobless Reincarnation Season 3 will be on Crunchyroll. Now, for the next show I want to talk about is this particular property has been, and that property being Ghost in the Shell. They've taken a lot of stuff has been done. Some of it is excellent. Some of it is terrible. Some of it's right down the middle. And you can argue in different directions for all of it. But the thing that I think is interesting about Ghost in the Shell is that the manga is really goofy. And while different shows have taken aspects of the manga and adapted them, you haven't had a moment for Ghost in the Shell where they've tried to do a pretty direct adaptation of the manga. And this for a bunch of weird reasons. The manga can get pretty weird and horny. There are multiple scenes where a bunch of female characters just covered in baby oil in 1980s style One Piece swimsuits. It gets excessive. But there is a jokiness and a different vibe to the manga of Ghost in the Shell that don't quite get very often in any of the many anime adaptations. The closest you can get is scenes like when the Major hacks Basso to make him punch himself in the face. That's a much closer to reality, to manga kind of thing. Because the thing that people forget a lot about both anime and manga is that, yes, they are more mature art forms, but they are still entertainment and gag art forms, and very often very serious stories still have gags in them, still have jokes in them. That's part of what people love about anime, is that it can swing back and forth. And I think in the Ghost in the Shell anime franchise, at least, it hasn't had the opportunity to be the goofy that the manga has gotten to. So that's the second thing I am talking about. And if you can't tell, this is going to be a fairly short episode, just because I'm only covering 3 shows and all that fun jazz. But, so, I'm looking forward... Oh, and I forgot to mention what streaming service that Ghost in the Shell will be on. This is the one that sucks. And I apologize. It will be on Amazon Prime. If you know anything about Amazon Prime, they somehow managed to get shows of the season, things that are best in class, and then no one watches them because it requires that you have a subscription to a shipping service to get a video streaming service, and then it also requires that you slog through the Amazon Prime interface, which is one of the single worst streaming interfaces I think I've ever interacted with. The search function is barely functional. The subtitling and dubbing situation on there is, I don't know what anybody's doing over there, but it's probably drugs because it's insane. They had that big kerfuffle, actually not kerfuffle, straight up controversy and fail with trying to My suspicion is that they were trying to release AI dubs, and they just backpedal as soon as they realize, oh, everybody thinks these are terrible. There's a bar here, and we vaulted under it aggressively. That's my suspicion there, because that's what the context clues of that whole situation stand in. But it doesn't change. It doesn't change the fact that they're a licenser, and they're going to keep licensing shows. And this year, they got Ghost in the Shell, and Ghost in the Shell is supposed to be a much closer adaptation of the manga, and it's done by Science Saru and all that magical jazz. So it's probably worth if you have access to Prime, giving it a look. But once again, it is streaming on Prime, unfortunately. So now, for the last show, it's a total curveball. You may have seen a trailer floating around that had become a meme of its own, much in the way that Zenko Dance became a meme of its own, and that is a trailer for the show that I think is going to be on Netflix, based on the trailer for it I just saw when I was searching the name to make sure I got the name right, called Jimoto Psycho. And I love this idea. So, to give you an idea of the premise, because this is the only of the three that I am featuring here that's a wholly original thing, that doesn't have that isn't a returning property. But the idea behind it is this slice of life show where where you're following these three cute girls who would normally ostensibly be doing cute things, and would have been like, oh, we love our hometown kind of show, which is a not uncommon slice of life way of doing it, except they live in a kind of bad neighborhood that feels like it leads to a world that has death cage matches like in Battle Royale. Their version of doing cute things is getting into gang wars and doing drugs on a Saturday afternoon. There's this glossing over of aspects, especially of Japan, but of all countries, because all countries have a kind of PR thing going. Hilariously, America's is not very good right now. But what you see with the World Cup currently happening is you see all these incredible stories of people from all over the world landing in America and going out into it in a way that you don't do when you're here for a normal vacation. You have German people in Waffle Houses. You have the Japanese guy who is experiencing increasingly more insane restaurant hospitality that makes no sense to him all over the country, which is amazing. If you want a good time, by the way, look up Japanese man eats at American Mexican food restaurant for the first time, and the man had, I don't even think he gets to the meal. I think that he experiences full-on ego death over endless chips and salsa, which is such a normal American thing to experience at any Mexican restaurant anywhere in the country that we don't even think about it. But to him, it was like this explosion of understanding of just like, oh, people are just nice like this. There's no expectation, there's no societal thing. This is just what America has decided to do for each other in a restaurant scenario. What is happening? And I think that goes both ways. I think that one of the things that traveling gives you is not only the experience of going to beautiful places and seeing incredible things from around the world. That is part of it. But I think that the most valuable part of traveling, and I've always liked this part of traveling, so I'm probably biased, but the best part of traveling is when you make it to a place that does not care if you're there. I'm not saying it doesn't have tourist trappy things, or if it doesn't have like stuff that might be in a guide, but the general area of the place genuinely does not care that you're there. You're not the only person using it. A great example of this that I will give in Tokyo of all places is Kabukicho, so infamous red light district of Tokyo with the famous sign and the Godzilla head in Toho Studios, hilariously has the most insane adult stores and businesses just down back alleys and around the corner and all this other stuff, but also has this massive, I want to say 12-floor tower called Kabukicho Tower. And this thing is built as a self-contained tourist trap. You go in here, and there's like a floor with it clearly meant to be like a club experience. The floor that's meant to be like a cyberpunk restaurant. There's all this stuff is here. There's an arcade floor. I didn't go in there until I was almost done with my time in Japan, even though on my very first day, I stayed across the street from it. Like, there's an Appa hotel that is literally across the street from, you're staring into the window of the cyberpunk restaurant in Kabukicho. And my immediate understanding of that place was like, that's not really what this is. Like, that's not the deal. If you come here and you spend a majority of time in there, I went in later because I'm surely curious. That's not really what this place is. That is, and it's not even that, it's that they're putting their best foot forward in a way that they think that tourists want to see. The reason why I'm saying this is because very many media projects that come out of a country really want, on some level, to represent their country a certain way. In the late season of JJK, when you're following the lawyer guy, I forget the lawyer who has the domain expansion, the judge man, that judge Yuji, his arc in that show details so much of what is wrong with the police department that you don't ever see in a lot of anime. You just don't see it because it's not very clean cut. A great way to see this stuff is to read or listen to. He narrates all of them. A lot of Jake Adelstein's books, because he goes into detail of this is how the Japanese police department works, and because he's going into detail from an American point of view, isn't that forced confession? And somebody is like, sure, that's how we do it here. Like, they're not bashful about it, but like, it's hard to recognize this. It's hard sometimes to recognize the system from inside of it. And a thing I like about attempts like Jumoto Psycho is, as project, is they're trying to give you a unvarnished look at what still exists. Because if you go anywhere in the world, there will be great parts of the place to live and terrible parts of the place to live. When I was in Morocco, I went with my family, but somebody in my family had wanted to go to Morocco for a long time. But the reason that, actually, my mother had wanted to go to Morocco for a long time, but the reason that we didn't was specifically because I look like ethnically Moroccan. I'm not, but I look that way. And sure enough, when we were there, if I walked just far enough away from anyone else, people there pegged me as Moroccan, but not just Moroccan, they pegged me as wealthy, which was unnerving to understand. But in the middle of Marrakesh, which is an incredibly sprawling, incredibly busy city, there is one of the 10 best hotels in the world. I think it's called Mamouya. You walk in there, and it is the picture of what you want Morocco to be. You can also be in that hotel and never leave. And alarmingly enough, we went there for lunch. The buffet lunch was $100, which a head, which is wild. It was very good, but it was wild. But also, the thing you should know is, if I had stayed in a hotel, I didn't stay in that hotel, but if I had stayed in that hotel, I would not have had to touch a single thing. Because from the moment I walked in, they pegged me, and there was a person following me. Because I'm disabled, and the best version of hospitality we can do right now is make sure that he doesn't need to struggle to do anything within the hotel grounds. So I went down the buffet line and there was somebody following me with a plate. Usually I just struggle through it and balance the plate weirdly and it's fine, but they're like, nope, this is part of the deal. But you go immediately out of the hotel and it's a totally different thing. But if you do it right, you can leave the airport in a van, probably provided by the hotel, get to the hotel, check in, and never interact with anything you don't want to. I think it's the Caribbean, where Great Chris Rock bit about it, where we drive from, where if you look out the window apparently, on the drive from the airport to the resort for the Caribbean, you will see some of the most horrifying things and some of the most insane humanitarian nightmares you've ever seen. But you'll get to the hotel and it'll be like it never happened. I'm laughing just thinking about it because it's a really funny bit. But the thing that interests me about Jumoto Psycho is, yes, the trailer looks hilarious. But what the trailer is getting at is this stuff still could exist. Paris is a beautiful city, but just outside of what you see of Paris are just the biggest homeless scene. Wild amounts of homeless encampments. And that's true in America, too. The thing about America is we are so much more democratic that stuff gets the camera pointed at it. I'm sure there are still people with drug addiction problems in Japan. I'm sure when I was in Japan in 2020, from 2023 to 2024, over a few years break, basically, I was walking down the street and just saw two human beings. I'm like, gangsters. I'm a man from New Jersey. I know what a gangster looks like. I know the difference between that person's play acting and that's the real deal. These guys were out for some sort of collection thing. It was just walking down the street. Like, if I was born insane, I would have taken a picture. But I like my fingers unbroken, so I didn't. But, it's like, stuff have been cleaned up, and you may take all the stories that I've told, that lots of people have told, about the kind of safety you feel in Japan, and think, oh, that stuff just doesn't exist here. No, it does. You just aren't seeing it. Because you didn't grow up. So, this is what I'll leave this, I guess. But when I was first planning my trip, Kie was very excited because she had been home for a couple of years at that point, obviously. She was home during COVID because New York obviously changed for the way worse. And she was just like, I've got a passport that gets me out of this nightmare and gets me to a way more protected place. I'm going to go over there. I'm like, good on you. But she was really excited. I was really excited to see her and spend time with her. Only when I was planning, she saw an article that I don't even know where she saw this article about a bed bug, like a rampant bug issue in Osaka that was kind of being from hostel constantly. Like, no one could clean it up because as soon as you cleaned up one hostel, another hostel had bed bugs. And she sent me this, like, really insane long text message, if I remember, over line. Like, hey, I got this insane article. Don't stay at a cheap, shitty hotel in Osaka. I don't want you to get bit up by bed bugs, and I don't want bed bugs. I'm like, Kie, I'm not staying at a $50 a night stay hotel anytime if I travel, if I can help it. Like, I'm just not going to do it. If I'm going on a trip, I think I want the hotel to be like a safe to land at the end of the day. And luckily, I was very smart in doing that because, oh boy, was I in pain from going up Mount Inari. I was stiff and creaky and very sore for like, I want to say full. Like, but this said that was she's like, oh, I only tell you this because I know a lot of people want an authentic experience. And the thing I said to her is still something I will always hold true. I said, I'm not one of those insane people. I'm not one of the people who crave an authentic experience. I crave experience where it feels like they don't care if I'm there or not. That's a very different experience. I know I'll never be Japanese. If you have any hope of that and you're not, you never be either. In the same way that all the people from the World Cup are experiencing things that they can't have experienced because they could never hope to immigrate to America and like be part of America. And America is wholly unique because of that, because that experience is possible. Being born here means, being born and growing up in America means a very specific kind of thing that is very different from people who came over. Like, I have a friend from high school who I still talk to most weeks, who, he and his family came over from Russia. And they're so culturally Russian still that it's pretty impressive. But he also been American in many ways, because he grew up for the majority of his life in America. So what World Cup fans are seeing going all over the United States, very often for the first time, is little peeks inside of America. Like the German, like the, who took it to Waffle House and was like, I love this way back. They don't know, like, the kind of mess in which Waffle House exists. They're just experiencing it as, like, a cultural vacuum subject. And the thing I like about the idea of Jimoto Psycho is that it's going to just be like, oh, this is, like, it's possible for this kind of gross neglect and badness to exist inside of this country. To exist inside of this, we're telling us about kids who aren't from, like, a suburb, or from, even from, like, rural Japan or like that. We're telling a story about kids who are from the bad part of us. What does that look like? What does it look like to be like a teenage girl in a place that's that screwed? And sure, it'll be silly, but it'll be something like what Blacklist Rowena are, but it'll be doing it inside of a way that's probably less cloistered than what the kind of Fujiyama gangster did for Black Lagoon, which if you've seen Black Lagoon, Jormungand, and there's another one I'm not thinking of right now. But there's these like grimdark, and I like them, these grimdark shows that feature a criminal main cast. Durara also does. And what they do largely is they encapsulate the entire cast and the setting and almost separate it from the average everyday people. This happens with a lot of any kind of main cast focused entertainment. Like, you're seeing people who are in their own little world and they're not necessarily interacting with quote unquote normal people. Jimoto Psycho seems like it might be a little less that, which I find really interesting. But on that note, apparently, that's where I'm going to leave it.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed the podcast, and if you did, be sure to subscribe wherever you're listening or watching. If you're listening to it on a podcast platform and they allow you to give a 5-star review, be sure to do that. If you're watching this on YouTube and you really liked what you saw, be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel and like the video. In addition, if you want to make sure that you don't miss a beat, be sure to hit that notification bell so you know when new episodes drop. But if you're wondering, they drop every Thursday night Eastern time. And on that note, if you really love the podcast, and you really love what I'm trying to do here, be sure to give the website a look. That website is bento-box.ghost.io. There will be a link in the description of either this podcast or this video. It'll also be linked in the description of the entire podcast on the information page. It'll also be linked in the description of the YouTube channel. So there's plenty of ways for you to get to that website and check it out. If you want to follow me, my social links are also listed in the footer of that page. So once again, go over there to find that stuff. But I hope you liked the episode. I look forward to talking to you next time. But until next time, I have been Alex. This has been Bento Radio, and I'll talk at you later.